Should we go for it? Okay, good. Well, let's start. And by the way, I'm Paul, and Lucy is my far better half, and she's doing the Barbie movie upstairs. So if you think that would be more fun, then do feel free to go. So what we're going to do is have a look at the current cultural scene, particularly with the youth in mind, and how are we going to engage with it all? So, because it's a very different thing. Good, Andy will be sharing first, and then the second part wants it to be more of a kind of a discussion. But first of all, could you just give us your name, and in 10 seconds or less, can you say what you would like to get out of the next hour?
I'm David, I'm head of Baptist Church. I would like to get out of this some really good visual ideas on how to get this across to young people and
Brilliant.
congregation.
10 seconds, thank you. Good. Luke.
Hi, I'm Luke. I'm sitting here because I had a 10-minute conversation with Paul last time. It was so fascinating and blew my mind that I'm like,
My name is G.B. I'm from St. Peter's. I think what I've come to just want to how to proactively engage with contemporary culture.
Thank you. That's lovely.
I'm Glynis from River Church in Marlow,
Yep.
and I didn't actually know exactly what this was going to be about, so I was quite intrigued to find out. But when you said at the beginning, that's quite relevant for me because I've got teenage grandchildren.
Fantastic. Okay, engagement. That's really good.
I'm Susan. I'm from River Church Marlow as well, and like Glynis, so ditto.
Okay, engagement. Great.
Sue, I'm from this church, knew about the same.
Okay.
I'm Jill, I'm from Brockley, south of London, and I'm here because I think the task is so utterly daunting. So I'm daunting, and I'm here to listen and learn.
How? Okay, fantastic.
Hayden from the Well in Camberwell. I'm here because I've got a friend who has got some really fascinating perspectives on cultural kind of commentary, so I'm interested in hearing another perspective.
Okay. Yeah. Perspective.
Yeah. I'm Phil, I'm here just to make sure there's no religious words used.
Great. The word please, that's great.
I'm Cathy, Phil's wife, and just the tools to talk to people who aren't Christians to make it relevant.
Okay, the cross-cultural aspect of communication. Fantastic, brilliant, good. Andy.
Sorry. Okay, so I'll chat a kind of just introduction thing. It's kind of foundational in a way, thinking about culture and so on.
Excuse me, are we going to get copies of this?
Can you? Yeah, remind me. Shall I do this?
I think so.
Yeah, okay. All right, so there we are. Why is culture so slippery? Do you find it slippery? We don't have time to have a lot of interaction, which is frustrating, but what we'll do, I'll chat for a bit and then we'll talk together in small groups and so on. So I'd love to make this an interactive thing, but I'll just throw some things out. So let's see. If you think culture is slippery, by that I mean the world in which we live, the culture, the society, the ethos. There's a lot to try and get your head around. Like Jill says, it's kind of a bit daunting, frankly, especially for us Christians. One of the things is that culture is holistic in the sense that everything we experience and think and do and say is to do with culture. It just is. That's, our culture, British culture, for example, it includes absolutely everything in life. That's pretty big, isn't it? Not only that, it's slippery because most of it is unconscious. You don't get out of bed thinking, I wonder what my culture thinks about, relationships or supper. Do you know what I mean? Or my job. It just operates at a level, and then there's an even deeper level. There's even more unconscious that we think out in a second. That's another thing. Next one. is on the basis of those very things, almost saying the same thing, is that because it's unconscious, because it has to do with everything, it's like the oxygen we breathe. You're not thinking about oxygen, it's just there, isn't it? Culture works like that. It saturates literally everything. There's no thought, no relationship, no dimension of life in any particular context that isn't saturated. So, and of course it's very subjective, so you're living life from your own point of view. And because it's all taken as read and it's all uncritical, again, we don't think about our culture anymore, we think about looking with our eyes, it's just the way it is. And subjective therefore means that, it's hard to say, isn't it? I don't know. It means that to try and evaluate it, to step back from something you're in that operates in an unconscious, saturated, subjective way, is almost impossible. It's very difficult at the very least. So what am I doing here? So you almost, when you go to somebody else's culture, most of us have travelled probably, not so much when you're on holiday, though you get the initial, but when you live in another culture especially, then stuff really hits you like a steam train. Oh, the very normal things, the way people behave together and the way we eat our food, everything, they do it differently. And it helps you then think, in fact forces you to think, oh, right, so that's how we do it, and it really is different, see what I'm saying? So, evaluation from within is difficult, though not impossible. Culture has been around for a very long time in any particular. So here we're talking about hundreds, if not sometimes thousands of years of the way things have been and developed. And because it's changing, there are layers, and Paul's going to talk about changing. There's a very helpful way. There's layer upon layer upon layer. No wonder it's not easy to get your head around, because we're talking hundreds, if not thousands of years of life corporately lived together. So we shouldn't be too surprised if, as an individual, we're thinking, oh, how do I navigate this? It's constantly changing, which makes it slippery, so we live in a very changing context here, don't we? But that's true at every level, in every culture. And there is this, because it's also unconscious, because it's so subjective, but it operates at a group level, a whole level, it means there's lots of pressure which is not conscious mostly, it's mostly unconscious, on the way I think, the mindsets, if you like, what Paul talks about, strongholds of the mind. So that, enough to get you going just to think about. But it's all real, we bandy around these words, don't we? Culture here and da-da-da, what do we mean? Well, if you look it up, anthropology and the rest of it, this is one of the definitions that's given. Culture is, say some people who know what they're talking about, and integrated, it all comes together. It's not just anecdotal stuff, randomly thrown together. The whole thing is developed in an integrated way. So one thing influences another. It's learned, so you're not born with your culture. So if you or I were born in Basutoland or Indonesia, we would grow up with a very different culture, and it would be our culture. We would be Indonesian, we would be Brazilian, we would be whatever. And we learn it. They say that something like 90% of your culture is learned and absorbed by the age of 3. You're barely walking and talking, really. And because that's the way humans are, we're designed to absorb and imitate, and it's all happening unconsciously. Patterns, patterns of mind and speech and action. So the way we behave, the things, the ideas that we think about, the products, and certainly the first two again, those kind of taken for granted unconscious things, characteristics. So that's one definition. Here's another one. It's the human-made part of the environment, including two and subjective elements. So it's constructed. So the postmoderns are right when they say socially constructed. They are talking about culture. There's more to be said than that. But in terms of how you and I think and speak and act is very much conditioned by what we've grown up in and continue to be part of. So it kind of helps us to think, yeah, now I'm beginning to get a sense that what we're dealing with here is just like the oxygen I breathe, essential and vital and crucial, and yet because it's so assumed, so taken for granted, we hardly give it any thought. But it behoves us, if we are followers of Jesus and we want to see change in this culture or another, like a guy called Legalism anybody know the name? He was a missionary from here, 40 years in India, then came back as a kind of missionary to this society for 25 years in his later life. And he was very good at these understandings. And he says you need two things. You need to be biblically, or you need to dwell and live in and inhabit your own story as a Christian, which is the Bible. So biblically fluent, spiritually fluent, but also, he says, to be effective, you need to be culturally fluent as well. So we need to know and live in our own story, but connect with and understand and live out and live with those in the society. And often we're poor at both those things. We're pretty poor at our biblical dimension, but even more poor often because we're not giving it much thought and reflection on what's going on. We just bounce, like most people do in our media age, bounce from one situation to another without being too reflective about it. And more like Paul says, you know, every wind and doctrine just bats us around, so we're not much use. Characteristic culture, just very briefly, it's, by definition, it is a total design for living. It just is. And so, as we say, it embraces all of life, it addresses all the issues of life to a greater or lesser extent. So sometimes may be quite effective at answering life's deepest questions, but other aspects of the culture are quite poor. So for example, are materialistic, mechanistic, post-enlightenment, last 250 years, explanation of the universe and therefore humanity. I would say, I use the word attenuated, you know, like gum that's got very stretched. Because if everything is a few bits of matter and energy thrown together randomly, it's not a very effective way of explaining the human passions, and even only before we get to spiritual longings. You know what I mean? So, nonetheless, it seems to function quite well. Here we are in this age, but there are still gaps. It's interlocking, we've hinted at, so everything connects, everything ramifies, meaning you touch an aspect, you scratch this bit, something pops up over there. And a classic example is when the missionaries went to Western Africa, they encountered polygamy, and they said, oh no, this is terrible, you need to divorce all your wives past bar one. And so all those wives, ex-wives, ended up in prostitution because there was no space for that, and misreading ways in which you didn't understand it and therefore didn't know. But it ramified, has an impact. It makes sense to those who are in it. Again, it's because it's so unconscious. You don't, the way you use your knife and fork, the way you interact with members of the opposite sex, with your parents, when you understand authority. Unless there's change brewing, then we behave and even think in a particular way. And so for children growing up, remember that 3-year-old, 90%, it's reinforced, this is the way we do it. Not that way, dear, let's do it this way. This is how you hold your fork. And implicitly, as well as explicitly, how we regard people from another culture. Well, of course, they're this, aren't they? And we have jokes about this kind of thing. And it's just reinforcing the same kind of thing over and over again. So it's not thought through, it's not rationally evaluated, it just is the way it is. And makes sense, probably. And as I've hinted already, it's imperfect. And that's good to know, isn't it? Because a culture like ours or any other actually has huge gaps in it, but we're not aware of those gaps, especially if we're part of that culture. We don't know where our gaps are. It's like your own personality. Other people can see your gaps only too clearly, thank you very much. I'm not pointing at anyone in particular. And if you, a marriage, for example, or any other relation, is a cross-cultural experience. We've had that for 40 years, so we can got a t-shirt on that. And it's when they call them family mirrors. And when you start living together with somebody, it's like a mirror is being held up in front of you, and it's not very comfortable. It really isn't, because your gaps are being. So we need that culturally for us to try and understand what's going on. And because it doesn't completely satisfy, there's an opportunity there, because our Christian church, or our church culture rather, has also got gaps in it. And when people come and they see what's going on, what on earth are we doing it like that for? Because we've always done it that way. So, briefly, layers of culture. Here's my favourite diagram. No time to go into this, so I'll just put it there. Behaviour is what happens in a context, in a culture. It's what's done. In itself is not particularly of value, that's the next level. It's done because people think it's a good idea. Education, or particular jobs, or the way families operate, or do you see what I mean? And that's what a good family or a good something is like. It's best done that way. And that in turn rests on what we think is true, our beliefs about human beings. And different cultures have different views. The role of men and women, for example, is a good example of that, and it's a belief system. But, and that's what I'm going to finish on now, rests on something even deeper. You can see that this going down here is going underground. So I've hinted at it already. So culture operates at this kind of level, or in fact the whole level, but the deeper you go, the more significant it is, but the more invisible it is. And roots of a tree go down and out to the same extent that branches go up and out. So there's at least as much here as in a sense. The next picture illustrates it even more like an iceberg. And we're getting on to something called worldview. Remember, in the tree, I called this worldview down here. And if beliefs are in the tree, think tree, are what is true, then roots, worldview, is about what is real. Yeah.
Have you read anything really when a foreigner comes to London? You know, it's very rude, but they're very open for changing the culture. There is a lot. Mentality is changing, especially in the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm only interested if you have read about anything about how to this happening.
There are some books that I do and don't know about. I'm not sure. Paul will have lots of stuff on that, and he's probably a better go-to person. But there's some anthropological stuff, Christian anthropology, that would be very helpful. Suffice at this point to say that, like those root systems, what is real is the unconscious. So we've got our beliefs that, at least in part, are conscious. Our worldview, which simply means the way we view the world, it's like a pair of specs that we're wearing, tinted, say pink, and everything's pink. So the worldview on which a culture is built is assumed and unconscious. So the things that we take for granted, that we never think about, are the 90% of what is responsible for the way we think it has to be. See what I'm saying? That's worldview. And that's what we need to engage with. I'll just go to the quote and then finish. Somebody's put it this way: differences in worldview, the assumptions and the unconscious basis that we all in a culture share to a greater extent are the most difficult of all cultural barriers. Why? Because they're unconscious. And because they're so so profound, and they're so deep, slightly unconscious in your mind. How do you access that? Well, there's the unconscious of a societal mind, and there's the strongholds and mindsets and so on that we need to go over. Paul's going to talk a bit later about the spiritual dynamics of that. Of course, it's what's at the foundations and all the way through these things. At this stage, we should just, how long have we got? Just maybe 5 to 10 minutes. I'm sorry it's so short because I'm going to pull a bit of space. There's a few questions, but oh yeah, just some encouragements for us to do. We don't have time for that. Maybe use these just as a guide, but it's picking up on like Constantine's done. What are we talking about here? And because I'm giving you such a short space of time, it's almost offensive really to give you 5 to 7 minutes to do it. But if you do it in pairs, maybe, then we can get a little bit. Well, maybe 3.
Especially if you look at the first one, I think that would be really helpful, because then we can jump in with what we come back with, bouncing into the next one.
Okay, so 5, 7 minutes or whatever in 3s, if we can get it to that sort of thing.
Yeah, okay. We're different from each
Yeah. It's such an helpful. So I can see the differences between being written and the biggest difference really, I don't see much of a difference. I think the spirituality
I put some tweets with it.
I see my rights. In terms of just doing little things that just in the last news is trained different what I'm trying to say is that British culture
So originally, probably when they very much because I think
I feel therefore which is it's a given option. Yeah, it's a given. It's not an option. It's different, it's a bit different. I do see that's what I'm trying to do.
Which is why you get cancel culture.
Okay, 2 more minutes, and we're going
But as an outfall,
kind of instead.
There's an underlying feeling of peace but it's changing. Still, I don't think it's gone. It's muddy, but it's still quite different. Quite other than a lot of others.
And that's not actually it's the hunger, which is nothing but just to go and like, try and slug it down. It's bad for my mental health. It's a 5-year-old conversation's been going on. So it's the triumph of it, yeah. Okay, good. Why don't we just have your kind of takeaway? Just one person kind of summarise from their group. What was their takeaway from what we just been talking about the last weekend?
We talked about materialism and competitiveness that puts you into materialism, and we talked about the self is king, and I define my own identity and my own.
Brilliant.
Don't dare.
Absolutely. Tell me what to do. Yes, exactly. Fantastic. Good.
And me and Kathy come from different angles. Just keeping the peace.
All right. How do you survive?
No, I was just sharing about some of the things I find dissatisfying about our culture. But Kathy's
So there are many really good things.
coming.
And that is absolutely perfect. It's a whole raft of things, isn't it? You can't say it's good or bad. One of the 5 pillars of Islam, isn't it, is care for the poor, is alms for the poor, isn't it? I mean, by any standard, that is a very good value, isn't it? And yet there's some other things as part of their worldview that, are very intolerant, so that we just kill someone who's, whatever. So that is, sorry, that was a complete generalisation there. But anyway, you get what I mean. The blasphemy law talking to someone recently, blasphemy law in Pakistan. And, it's a huge issue for them, huge issue. Good.
Okay, well, we talked about, we've got 3 people here from with different cultural backgrounds generally.
Yep.
And Jide was saying that he grew up in Nigeria here, but then lived in Nigeria, and there it was very much God existed, no question. It's just a complete, whereas that is very different for us. So we talked about the differences between that, and also even from a head to a heart.
Which I think is in West maybe from head to heart, in the heart comes from heart to head. Both is important.
Yes. Fantastic. We touched a little bit onto that. Do you want to?
Much of what you guys have said, I think, as well, kind of that feeling-based thing, but also that thing about truth being fluid, but also increased sense of tribalism and polarization. So truth is fluid, but you have to believe what I believe. And if you don't believe what I believe, then you're not part of my tribe.
Yeah.
And so there's you use this phrase sort of pseudo-tolerance. That we want to portray as tolerant, but actually we're incredibly intolerant.
Fantastic. Anything else?
Well, materialistic, aren't we?
Yeah.
Rationalistic. Very individualistic. Any other sticks?
Can I come in with a positive? We're artistic, we like the arts.
Yeah.
What am I good?
Good. Okay, well, it gives a real, that was really helpful. Okay, for lots of reasons. Thank you, Sammy, for setting that up. What I thought was we just try out a few ways that possibly work on a Sunday morning with a bunch of youth. And how would you work at that level? Here we are, there's some things. There we are, there's cultures everywhere. There we are, just come back 3 days ago from the Far East and went into Starbucks in China and had to, it's the year of the dragon and everyone's talking about dragons. So I bought myself a dragon. And we had a great time in there, you two. Here we are, here's a way of looking cross-culturally, okay, in 90 seconds, okay? Far Eastern worldview very much influenced by Confucius say, okay, you have to do, and it's a raft of relationships, and it's submission to roles, R-O-L-E-S, that's key here, okay? So there's going to be a harmonious society if you have unconditional submission to your teacher, to your country leader, to your master and apprentice. Yes, in marriage too. Master and apprentice, Kung Fu Panda, all that kind of thing. You will have unconditional, well, you'd have world peace because nobody dares argue. You may not answer, you may not ask questions. Okay. Confucius.
It's very good when in Japan there was accident with aeroplane.
Yeah.
No one was hurt. The guy won't follow the road.
Yeah. It's crazy. Okay.
Because everybody did what they were told to do.
Yeah.
And they got saved as well.
So crazies. Okay, then you get a bit nearer to home. Flew over the Middle East a couple of days ago. So there it's submission to rules, R-U-L-E-S. So where are there rules? Virtually every part of life, isn't it? How long your dress can be, or your hijab, depending on which part of where you are. It's submission to rules, isn't it? Life's an exam on what ever hand you've been dealt with. So there's a kind of bit of fatalism in there too, isn't it? And you do what you're told, and by the rules rather than so much by the roles, but they are intertwined. You can't actually take them apart. Okay, you get over here and got off the train, got off the plane the other day, and it's like a completely different thing. If you could see your BBC tweet this morning or news feed this morning, what about J.K. Rowling? Rowling, and how do we, should we stop watching Harry Potter or whatever? Because of, this morning on, just absolutely nuts, isn't it? Okay, so it's based on a whole load of things, and is just mentioned that. But what we're looking at in summary is there are 4 ideas that would say make. We obviously where we want to get to on a Sunday morning is looking through the world through Jesus's eyes. But let's just go through something since 2016. Okay, we've the term expressive individualism is used, and you've picked up most of it. Okay, you picked up most of it. It's based on humanism, man at the centre. But there's 4 main components. Okay, the first one is moral relativism, that's down there. There's a quote from Darwin that I'm not totally out, but he said, for somebody who doesn't believe in God or the afterlife like me, one's only rule of life, for me, as far as I can see, is to follow those impulses and instincts which are the strongest or seem right to a man at that time. Okay, so from Darwin, really, that's a good example. Moral relativism, what is it? We discussed that with the youth. So there obviously aren't much in the way of absolutes, but then it's taken even further by the time you get to postmodernism, so there's absolutely no absolute, there's absolutely no absolutes, and you have great fun talking about that. Is it an irony? Is it whatever?
It's a contradiction.
It's a contradiction in terms. You have great fun pulling that. The youth love it. They just really love bouncing stuff like that. So by this time, so there's no binary, no black and white, and we also have great fun with that. Okay, then you get into critical theory. Are you up to date? Does everyone know critical theory, what that is? Anyone Want me to do that in the 90 seconds?
Yeah.
Okay, well, 90 second summary. Just like Marx would say that in the economic world, there'd be the factory owners suppress the factory workers, and so therefore the factory workers need to have an uprising to put, the factory owners in their place, basically. So you would then it's obviously with the race thing, isn't it? So therefore, say, Laura would grow out of it, in the States, for years, whites, there's been so much oppression there, so therefore, there should be an uprising and to something or other. And for instance, one of the discussions is reallocation of land, that it shouldn't just be for the whites, it should be shared around and things like that. Put those, those old cotton mill owners' families back in their place. Then, of course, you can take it into other areas, the patriarchy. Go upstairs if you want to know more about that, and watch Barbie film. And then you can then go further than that. Obviously, because I'm a white straight guy, therefore I must be inherently, down on, gay people. So therefore I need to be put in my place, really. Now, so Stonewall gets up, and their third. So they have 3 points. A book called After the Wall. And it says 3 things. One is
Stonewall.
Stonewall, sorry. After Stonewall, there's a book called After the Wall, and it's to inform, to saturate, and to punish those who believe against that. So that the critical theory would be in that. So that's why Pride Month and things like that. So, for instance, we had a guy with I won't give you an example, but we had a guy came in with this thing on. With this, flag on, rainbow flag and the Pride Month, and he really wants to support that cause. And it was really, I didn't plan to do culture. Well, I didn't think that it might be an issue. I would have probably chosen a different month to have done some cultural fluency with them. And of course, he came and he was like coming like a cannonball, and and I said, well, how do you feel about this critical theory? And, just they were, J.K. Rowling, is it right that she has death threats for just having, for wanting to protect, in her mind, a number of girls, is, because of her own abuse. Oh no, that's terrible! And we had this, it was great. We were really singing off the same, hymn sheet by the end of it. It was great. He was really, Paul's really good. It's really good. It's kind of crazy. But we just brought everybody into the discussion, so it's a lot of fun. Finally, Gnosticism, that's Disney, it's inside me, all that, Moana, all that kind of stuff like that. And everybody's getting their superpowers, and you really need to discover who you are, and that's in common parlance. Now, if you put all those things together, which coming right from Descartes you mentioned, I think, therefore I am. Then it goes to Rousseau, which is I feel, therefore I am, and the Romantics, and all the way up. You don't actually need to know many people, as long as you know a little bit about Marx, a little bit about Freud, a little bit about Nietzsche. God is dead. So morals get totally unchanged. And hitting with Darwin at that point of view. Know a little bit about one or two of the postmodern guys. And you're away, really. That's all you need to know. Okay, you don't have to study loads and loads of it, but we can point you in places where you can get some summarised of those things. But, and of course, if you have those 4 things that I just mentioned, okay, moral relativism, postmodernism, critical theory, and a bit of Gnosticism on the top, the T of transgender makes absolute sense. In fact, it would be bonkers not to think that it's right in this worldview. And once you've got that far with your youth group or with your grandchildren, you can work with it. So you have to come out of your culture to see back into your culture. Then what do we do? This is a more complicated bit of it called mapping. We do way, truth, and the life for each of the different main worldviews I just mentioned. You could do it for Indian, you could do it for Japanese, you could, there's a whole load of, other ones that you can do it for. But, so we ask a number of questions, okay? First of all, what is kingdom positive, what's kingdom neutral, and kingdom negative about another worldview? So we get them to kind of do, and they pick it up straight away. They can see what is wrong about blind submission in the Far East. Well, of course, the totalitarian government can easily do that. You're brainwashed. Oh, but what about over here if you step out of line? That's good. We talk about cultural Marxism and things like that. So great fun, talk about that. What's kingdom positive, kingdom negative? You know, the fact that in China we put honey on our cuts, is that kingdom negative, kingdom positive, or kingdom neutral? It's not one or the other, is it? You know, it works, you know, there's nothing in or out of the Bible which is going to go there, and you talk about what's the rule of life and things like that. Okay, then we talk about syncretism, and that's really good fun. Okay, if I really want to have time, I'd spend a bit of time showing them the Jesus, is it the Jesus movie? The Jesus Revolution. Just got the DVD and just cut out a couple of clips, and we looked at that. And again, they love that. So what's a hippie Christian look like? You know, what's a postmodern Christian look like? Oh, what's a critical theory Christian look like? Oh, how much of that have we got in the room today? You know, they just love it, and then they kind of point fingers at each other. And, you know, it's really. Can you give me some examples of things you know? My Lydia, who's speaking upstairs, last year, I was just saying to David and Luke, that last year. She had a 5-year-old student say to her, she's a primary school teacher, say to her, the homework you're giving me, which I think was to find some ants or find some slug or something in the garden, is bad for my mental health. I mean, flipping it, you know, it's 5-year-olds already got this stuff in it. Okay, so we go into syncretism, and then the 3 ways that we then. So if you can show them that it does make total sense, but what's our worldview? And then we spend a lot of time with Jesus' worldview. I'm not going to go into it now because I've got 20 seconds to finish. I would say 3 ways that we try and get the youth to engage. I call it WWW. It's with words, okay? That's really important. So that's the kind of stuff we're doing. The wonder side, that is more the spiritual side. You have to, how do we get people off drugs in China? They believe if they stop taking that heroin, their next fix, they're going to die. Okay, they've been brainwashed. How do we unbrainwash our youth groups? And we talk about it. It's great. You know, what do we do in China? We pray in tongues for 15 minutes, you know, when we start our quiet times, because our minds are so blown, there's no point in having